Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today to hear more about the projects and improvements we're planning for 2019, building on all the great work we did last year. I'm really excited to be here with Jess and Rose, whose team was critical in helping us roll out our streaming video support for the Q1 release, and they have some great input, and as Scott said, they do love to answer questions, especially of the cataloging sort if you're so inclined, so we do have that expertise on hand. 360 Services and Intota are the engines that power both EJP and 360 Link and Summon by helping you manage the library's critical electronic content. So we want to ensure that you continue to receive value from these services in 2019 and moving forward. This year, we will again have 4 releases in February, May, August, and November on the dates indicated here. And across these releases, we are introducing several big initiatives while continuing to deliver enhancements and fixes to all of the products in our suites. The roadmap has 3 focal points. First is the need to manage streaming videos. The second is support for emerging industry standards. And the third, as I mentioned, is ongoing refinements for all of the services that you are currently running. The first phase of video management will be released in February, and as we saw in the previous slide, that will be at the very end of the month, going out on the 27th and 28th. Now, analyzing and implementing both KBART and Counter Code of Practice Release 5 standard requirements is going to occur throughout Q2, Q3, and Q4. And of course, fixes and refinements occur throughout the year. And I'll provide a little more detail on each of these moving forward. Regarding streaming videos, in February, 360 Core and Intota will be able to manage more than 80,000 individual video titles from some 300 Alexander Street Press and SAGE databases. The content operations team, as Jess will let you know more details about, it will continue to onboard additional providers throughout the year, and we'll have many more details about both of these projects in just a few slides. The second focus point is integrating support for new industry standards. Now, KBART, which is a format for exchanging information about knowledge bases and knowledge base holdings, will be rolled out as a valid format for some of our internal tools, and then for ODSI, which is our offline date and status editor in 360 Core and Intota. Once the KBART automation standard is finalized, it's out for review right now, and because our processing capacity will have increased because of the recent move into the new data center, we can build on that automation standard in order to establish additional auto holdings programs for new providers. As many of you know, our providers are supposed to be Counter Code of Practice Release 5 compliant right now. Certainly that is not the case for many providers, leaving us in a bit of a wait-and-see position with regard to the data, how it's exchanged, and any ongoing changes to the Code of Practice as written right now. It's our intention to create a testbed for ingesting and processing the master reports that these providers are beginning to supply. And there are 4 of these master reports, and if you've seen the Code of Practice, you know that these master reports contain all the possible data points that are available for this release. And they are extremely different from previous releases of the Code of Practice, which makes this such a major shift in dealing with counter statistics. I do want to point out that all providers must continue to support the Code of Practice Release 4 version, which is the current version, so you're not going to have a disruption in receiving counter statistics, either because the provider does not yet support Counter Code of Practice R5, or because our testbed is still in development. So again, there should be no interruption in your ability to gather counter statistics because R4 must continue to be supplied and supported. Our last focus is continuing enhancements and refinements. These the following slides will detail some of our current plans. I should say that these lists are the most subject to change, and we have not even fully defined the Q3 and Q4 plans, simply because these refinements and fixes are based on feedback we get from our community. We weekly meet and discuss and prioritize issues as we receive them from you. The February release here are some of the highlights from the February release. We're making some improvements to the title contains all word searches for the eJournal portal, removing duplicate titles that tend to appear in some of the search results. For a 360 link, we have a lot of linkers to deploy in order to ensure streamlined linking to those resources. And we have an improvement to make the journal level URL visible in the sidebar. For Intota and 360 Core, we are allowing folks with view-only permissions to use overlap analysis. This is actually Intota specific. So this will enable view-only users to go in and do overlap analysis when you don't necessarily want them to be able to affect anything else in the application. We also have a couple of new management reports going out, one that details the public notes, another is going to provide information on new titles in databases, and yet a third will give you details on titles that have been removed from databases. Again, the May, August, and November releases are still being defined as we receive information about them. Some of the things that we've heard loud and clear from the community is that you want to see the last updated time date stamp on the EJP 2.0 page. There are some requests to better handle embargo dates from PMID and subscript numbers for PMID. And in Intota and 360 Core, we are going to incorporate a new permission that will display the account names in view changes. This is to improve a change we made at the end of 2018 as regards to GDPR, a GDPR implementation we put in. So this will allow operators to opt in to be able to see those personal names in the audit trail in order to figure out if something went wrong and how it can be rectified. Within Intota, we'll be able to see all the cost date upload errors without having to contact support. We've got several enhancements and refinements going in for resource renewal reports and checklists, and there are some HTML handling errors that we are going to take care of for ODSI. Again, this will be added to throughout the year based on what we hear back, and the roadmap will be updated in order to provide you additional information and details as we move closer to those release dates. But I want to get into the details of the streaming videos management that is coming out at the end of this month, and I suspect the reason a lot of folks are here. This is a project we've been working on and talking about for a while, close to a year, and that's the sheer size of it is due to the fact that there are really three big pieces to it. The first is the mechanics of getting videos from the metadata the providers give us into our internal system. So really the ingestion part of our pipeline, just being able to get that metadata and be able to do something with it. The second piece is the feature set that's necessary to manage videos and in 360 and in Intota. What does it look like? Where does a certain piece of data go? How do fields that we usually use for books and journals, how can those be synthesized with video fields in needs? And the third big piece is the feature set that's necessary to act on this content type, the new video content type, in downstream applications like EJP, like Link, like Summon, and 360 Mark updates. So I want to be very clear about what is going to be released on February 27th and 28th and what you can expect. Because unfortunately, not every single detail of those three big kind of pipelines I talked about is going to be available on February 28th. But let me tell you and then show you what will be available. The first is that individual video titles will be represented in those Alexander Street Press and SAGE packages. That's why there's an asterisk up there. We'll have more information about why those two providers and what's next when we talk to Jess and Rose. But you will be able to see those individual titles rather than just simply a zero title database for those providers. Second is searching for videos. Not only will we have a new search criterion called videos, but video titles will be returned as part of the all titles search criterion. Within 360 Core and Intota, video titles will be identified, explicitly identified as videos and not as books, not as journals, or not miscellaneous or other. It's its own new content type. The videos that you do subscribe to or begin tracking in Core or Intota will appear in the eJournal portal discovery, and I'll show you what that looks like. For users of 360 Resource Manager and Intota, all of your ERM assets will apply to those titles and packages. So any notes, licenses, contacts, payments that you want to apply are eligible to do so. And lastly, video titles will be included in the Tracked Resources report by default, and they will be delineated as videos. So that is what you're going to see right out of the gate with the Q1 release. Here I've got some split screen pictures to show you what these things look like both in Client Center as well as in Intota. On the left here you can see that we've got video in my particular test database for Alexander Street Press. I've got 8 videos. It's no longer a zero title database. And on the right you can see that represented as well in Intota. The ECAT search has been augmented with a new video search criterion indicated in these drop downs on the left in Client Center and on the right on Intota. And as I mentioned earlier, if you do an all title search, videos will be returned in those search results as well. You kind of saw this on the earlier slide. There is a brand new content type. It specifically calls out these titles as being videos. The top is Client Center and the bottom is Intota. And here is a demonstration of a result that will come back in the eJournal portal. This is the search for all titles, and as you can see, a motion picture or video came back with this. It contains the metadata that we received from the provider, so it includes things like the actor, Charlie Chaplin, as well as the provenance of which film it belongs to, which collection, as well as the original date of the movie. The ASP video test link will give you a link to that video. On this slide, on the top, you can see in 360 Core Client Center and in the bottom in Intota how those ERM assets can be applied to individual titles. So again, because it's not a zero title database, you've got a lot more options in handling and tracking and recording information about these titles. And finally, here is a snippet from a Tracked Resources report that I ran for my database. And you can see that the 8 videos from my test database are all represented here, and they are explicitly called out as videos. So we are going to continue to build on that great work throughout the year, and we know that we need to continue to, improve on those pieces in these general areas. The first is the ERM. Last year you saw that we added books into overlap analysis, and this year we need to make sure that videos are included in overlap analysis as well. There are some management reports that we will need to tweak a bit in order to make sure that videos are accurately represented in them, and perhaps include new management reports like tracked resources explicitly limited to videos. As we ingest more and more metadata from providers, we will look into ways that we can augment or enrich the display of these titles to represent kind of their unique content. They're simply a different beast in many ways from journals and books, and so we will be looking at how we can improve that. Licensing as well is a bit of an unknown. We all know that licenses for streaming videos are very different from books and journals, not necessarily DLF-ERMI applicable. But it's a bit of the Wild West right now. Folks are doing different things, and we need to see where the industry is moving in order to accommodate some of those idiosyncrasies. Many folks have asked me about 360 mark updates. Hey, when can we get some records for these video titles? We are looking into as next steps, first, what it's going to take to be able to provide brief records. Now, brief records will be limited pretty much to the data that we're getting from the providers. Some folks are going to want that, some folks maybe not. As we get into, or I should say as the content ops team looks into the intricacies of normalization, we should be able to provide some more rich and robust and higher quality, fuller records for these videos. The time frame for this is not yet established. We have to see what kind of data we're getting from providers and how quickly we can get some of those exercises like normalization done. So all of these things, we don't have specific time frames beyond this year, but we will be updating the roadmap as we learn more. So for discovery, I showed that the video titles will be available for discovery in EJP. The discovery requirements for Summon are going to be a little different. We certainly have to worry about the rights feed of content from 360 and Intota to Summon. But on the Summon side, they also need to look at things like making sure the content is loaded. What are match and merge rules? What are any of the UI refinements that needs to occur in Summon in order to best showcase these titles, make them discoverable, make them obvious in search results? That is something that the Summon team is working on this year. It's definitely on their roadmap. If you attended Brent's webinar, his roadmap webinar, he did talk about videos, and the recording is available. But please know that we are working concurrently on these things in order to make these videos much more visible and usable by your patrons and users. And last but not least, I've mentioned Content Ops several times because they have a huge hand in this. This team is responsible for helping bring providers on board by telling them what we need, how we need it to be formatted, how frequently we can get it. They will be working on the normalization that will drive things like making mark updates support full records, as well as making match and merge rules in Summon work, for example. So some of that processing logic will be coming out of that team. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Jess for some more in-depth conversation, specifically about the activities that Content Ops is doing.
Thanks, Amy. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us on the call with you. My name is Jess Short. I'm manager of the 360 KB, and I'm here with Rose McClendon, our lead cataloger on the KB. We're here in the Seattle office, and we're just really excited to be on the phone with you guys to talk about this project and just to be on the phone with other librarians. I'm a librarian. I got my library degree from South Carolina, and I've been with ProQuest Ex Libris now for about 2 years, and I don't get to talk to other librarians as much as I would like to, but when I do, I always enjoy it. Me and Rose, we love talking shop, so we're happy to be here. And like Amy said, this has been a labor of love across multiple teams. I was thinking back to our first meeting, which consisted of, we had our metadata librarians from our team and the discovery team. We had our developers, we had folks from our provider relations team, and we even had librarians from other universities there to get this ball rolling, because this is something we've been wanting a long time, but we wanted to make sure we did it right. Like I said, Rose and I are both librarians, and the rest of my team are librarians, and we feel really strongly about having reliable and manageable data for our customers. I mean, of course, it was tempting for us to just throw everything in there as was, but it would have been chaotic and unmanageable, and we didn't think it would serve y'all well. So when those talks did begin, we knew we were dealing with two major challenges, and Amy alluded to those earlier. So the first major obstacle was infrastructure, and the second was lack of standardization. So before we could do anything on the metadata side, we needed to have our KB recognize video as a proper content type. We knew we couldn't just load video and display as serials or monographs. So fortunately, our development team was able to update the KB to accommodate that type. The second challenge for us, or the fun part for our team, was getting the metadata for video to work in our KB. So for our products, for the KB to help aid in search and discovery, to supply correct link resolvers, and like Amy was talking about, the ability to have those full level MARC records, on our end we require a match to happen to form between a holding and a standard identifier. So historically for us, that requirement hasn't really been much of a problem, because the KB was originally designed to ingest title-level serials. They had titles and ISSNs and a primary matching point for us, and it was great. And then when we expanded to monographs, we had the title and ISBNs as matching points. But streaming video content introduces a new level of challenge, because those titles tend to have unique titles, and they also tend to be missing an international standard identifier. So the 360 KB team, we can urge the development of a streaming video identifier, and we do feel pretty strongly about being part of that conversation. But until one is created across the industry, our team requires us to re-engineer in order to accommodate different match points to make streaming video reliably accessible. So all that is to say, we basically needed to create our own standard. And to do that, we started with an overlapping analysis. We first looked at, well, what do we have? We looked at the records providers were giving to us. We examined what fields were being supplied, what we could rely on there. We then compared that to both our collection policy, because we do have a policy of what minimum requirements we will accept that can work in our system. And then also looking at the new fields we need to be expecting to work with and to accommodate, because video is a whole other animal. So we were looking at runtime and credits, for example. So all that's to say, the work we did ended up coming up with new fields that we needed to ingest, as well as new logic in order to accommodate video and make those match points happen. Amy, next slide. Okay, so you might be wondering why ASP and why SAGE, because there's a lot of video content out there. And of course, if we had it our way, we would have all the video content from everywhere included, and that is eventually our goal. But we're taking a phased approach. So ProQuest already has a lot of video content, but starting with Alexander Street Press just seemed like an obvious first step for us. One of their collections, Academic Video Online, is the most comprehensive and largest video subscription. They have everything in terms of subject areas. They cover stuff from dance to counseling. And they also have really respectable contributors like PBS and BBC. And then we looked at our own impact in terms of subscriptions. So we saw Alexander Street Press is one of the most subscribed collections for video in our KB, so we knew it was relevant there. And we also reviewed our incoming cases from customers, and many people were frequently making the request specifically for Alexander Street titles to be available. So, fortunately, we do have a close relationship with this organization. We even know their catalogers on a one-name basis. We talk to them all the time, as well as their metadata librarians. So we're really happy that Alexander Street is being included first in our list. And the second provider that we're going to include in this initial release is SAGE. And what can I say about SAGE? But we look at their records, we're always happy. I mean, SAGE is above and beyond, so consistently reliable with what they produce. And they're also one of the few who supply video certified ISBNs for their records. So because they use ISBNs for that, that just makes our job so much easier loading them, and it helps our customers' search and discovery experience much more reliable and satisfactory. So it was a no-brainer to go with SAGE. Amy, next slide, please. Okay, so who's getting on board, and do you have a vote? Lots of people are getting on board, and yes, you do have a vote. So after the initial release, we're going to start a phased approach of getting all of our providers that we currently have, as well as any providers that we don't have. So you'll see on the slide we have a number of providers that we already have title lists. They're currently represented as 0 title. We want to transform those, turn them into full text title lists so that you can use those. So that should just be a matter of us transforming those on our end, because we have everything we need. The second phase is a little more complicated. We technically have this content in Summon. We have a relationship there with Discovery, but we don't necessarily have title lists available. So we're hoping that our current relationship will help us in that endeavor, but we will be reaching out to these providers to try to get that content that we need to make this work. We know Canopy is a huge deal, so we have talked to them in the past, so we're hoping that we can make that happen. And, full disclaimer, if you guys wanted to also, in your free time, reach out to them and urge them to work with us as well, that would be okay. And then after that second phase, we have any new content that we haven't accounted for. We want to hear from you. So sometimes we don't always know about content. We often get Salesforce cases from our customers telling us what's going on in the industry, and we're really grateful for that. So feel free to use the Ideas Exchange for video content requests. For those of you who aren't aware already of the Ideas Exchange, it's an online forum that helps us get feedback from the community on what new collections or what new data you would like to see added. So you can post your request there, and then other members of the community, they vote on your idea, and the more votes you get, that pushes the request up in priority, and then we can add it. So that's the website for that is ideas.exlibrisgroup.com, and if you can be as specific as possible in terms of your collection and where you want it added, that would be a great help to us. So that's the providers we plan on getting onboarded, and that's how we would like to hear from you. We hope to hear from you guys. And Amy, next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about, the metadata fields, matching requirements. All that is part of contributing to our efforts to normalize. And you guys might be asking, well, what's normalization and why do we care? And so for that, we have Rose McClendon, our lead cataloger, who's going to talk a little bit about that. Rose, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Rose McClendon, and I am the metadata librarian lead for the 360 KB cataloging team. I have my MLIS from the University of Washington, and I've been here now working on the 360 products for over 7 years. So this, adding video content is something that's been discussed ever since I've joined ProQuest, and it's something that we want very much, and we've always wanted, and something that I know a lot of you, have wanted for a very long time. And if you have been with us for a while, you know that normalization is pretty key to the success of our products. Once a holding is normalized, it's associated with an authoritative title record, and that ties together the provider holdings and however they come into us, and whatever relevant MARC records we have, and it wraps it up in a little bow into a nice package. And you all know when different providers send in their metadata in title lists, they might send in different titles for the same exact resource. So we might get in New York Times, NY Times, NYT, New York Times Eastern Edition, et cetera. But once all of those are normalized to a single authoritative title record, all of these are then represented as a single unified title with your library subscribed holdings listed underneath. And it makes it clean and efficient, and that's what you want. Ease of discovery, ease for tracking, and then ease for your patrons. So once the authoritative title record is there, and holdings are normalized to them, we can then collocate alternate titles, whether it's from that provider title that's being sent through, or from alternate titles on a MARC record, say from the 246. We can add additional standard identifiers, say EISBNs or paperback ISBNs. We can pull out subjects from MARC records for subject searching in the eJournal portal. And all this information on the authoritative title record is then pushed to various products downstream, as has been mentioned before by both Jess and Amy. So, helping with display and discoverability in the EJP, helping to provide rights access to summon clients, linking in 360 Link and Summon, and then providing those full-level MARC records that you guys demand and you should rightfully get. So taking all of that into account, throwing videos into the mix has been extremely tricky. As Jess mentioned, there are no standard identifiers for video like there are for books and serials. And since we use standard identifier as one of our match points for normalization, we've had to be creative in how we think about, okay, we're going to normalize. What do we normalize on if there is no standard identifier? So we've had to take a look at a lot of the different available metadata from the providers that we have so far, and seeing kind of what's been there in common. And we've been working with our developers to expand the KB to use these like an additional point as a means of normalization on our side. And that's currently being investigated. Also, since there is no standard identifier, it's going to make normalization a little bit more manual, shall we say, because we'll often need some visual confirmation that we are normalizing the correct provider title to the correct MARC record. When you have a standard identifier, it's standard. It's pretty easy. So all of this is to say that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We're also going to need MARC records from the providers. We're going to want to make sure that these MARC records are of a high quality. We just don't want to send out junk. And so hopefully we'll be working with these providers to make their records better so that you guys can get them and get the level of service that you need and expect from us.
Thanks, Rose and Jess. I think we all appreciate that you don't want to send out junk, and I certainly have a better feeling for how difficult it is not to send out junk at this point. You guys put an incredible amount of work in there, and I thank you and your teams. That said, that is the official end of the presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have. I would like to point out that we are building a FAQ for the February 2018 release with details about streaming video support, and any questions that you have today will be incorporated into that FAQ.